You were there. You will have had interpreters. You will have known people who were desperate to flee the country, who were going to be at risk from the Taliban. We know that the vast majority of those who wanted to flee and were at particular risk of being persecuted or even murdered by the Taliban didn't make it out of Kabul in time before that US imposed deadline. Do you think that the likes of, whether it's Dominic Raab as Foreign Secretary at the time, the Permanent Secretary, Sir Philip Barton and others, do you think that they've got blood on their hands?
Well, certainly the facts speak for themselves in terms of there are those who were left behind, who were eligible to be evacuated, who were called forward pretty late on in the process and were unable to get into the airport. And some of those have since been killed. We have evidence of that. So, you know, I guess that speaks for itself, really. There is blood on somebody's hands. There are still people who are stuck and increasingly in danger of being hunted and killed. The Taliban is mounting a very specific operation to look for those they consider to be the most valuable, and they are being hunted and executed when found. So it is extremely upsetting and worrying for them.
There could have been no one working in government, at the Foreign Office, the MOD, Home Office, or anywhere that was dealing with this, who could have been under any illusion that this was a life or death matter in terms of getting people out. We were never going to get everyone out. Everyone knows that. But doing the best we could was absolutely vital. There's already been criticism from, a former, very, very senior figure, former chiefs of staff, senior chief, get his name right, Lord Dannatt, calling on Sir Philip Barton to resign on the basis that, leadership is why you're in these roles. Once you get into a position where you are appointed as a senior figure like that, part of your job is to be there when you are needed in a crisis, and returning from holiday would be a small thing to ask. Do you think that the Sir Philip Barton should resign?
That's not really for me to comment on, but I think that in terms of leadership, it does require trust. And those leaders who were forward doing incredibly difficult jobs and in impossible conditions were leading by example. And I think, all I would say is that leadership is something that you have to do with that trust between those that you are expecting to deliver on your orders or the decisions you make. And if you're absent as a leader, then that is very evident to those who are expected to.
And this is the thing, when we were told you, it wasn't until very late in the day that they actually instigated you 24/7 coverage at the Foreign Office, people clocking off at the end of their 8-hour shift, people working from home rather than the office. And we all know, I mean, I'm sure if you're writing a presentation, working from home in the quiet may be very easy, but actually people being in the office, talking to each other, sharing information, being able to sort of think together, plan together, that makes a massive difference in terms of coordinated action. We were hearing from this whistleblower, Raphael Marshall, that we're talking about every single email being clicked as open, so it could be said that they had all been read, when tens of thousands of these emails were never actually even read, let alone acted upon. And yet these were people on good salaries. They'll be highly qualified people. A lot of these people, Oxbridge firsts and all of that, because we know the Foreign Office is full of the creme de la creme. And yet they didn't really seem to think that it was necessary for them to pull out all the stops to try and save lives at a time when we had British soldiers trying to keep people safe outside Kabul airport, trying to actually get people out and working 36 hours at a stretch. It defies belief, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. As you said, those who were forward, not from just the military, but from the Foreign Office and from other government departments, were working 24 hours a day, and did not have the luxury of deciding that they were going to have time off to go and do other things. So it does sting, I think, for many of those who did everything they possibly could in really difficult circumstances to try and save as many lives as they could. And I know many of those felt and still feel fairly let down by the system, that they didn't feel was acting with enough urgency from the UK to do everything that was in their power.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, more has emerged about that evacuation flight with dogs belonging to the charity run by Pen Farthing. We also, of course, it got out an awful lot of his staff as well, but there were many other people who were not able to get out. It's now emerged that there was lots of criticism at the time that, getting out dogs and cats or whatever is not, I think we can all agree, as important as getting out human beings, who, particularly those Afghans who we'd promised safe passage to. It's now emerged a letter that was written by the PPS, the sort of office bag carrier to the Prime Minister, an MP who actually authorised this flight to take place. Speaking on behalf of Pen Farthing, even though he wasn't her constituent, clearly writing this letter in her capacity as speaking for the Prime Minister, authorising this flight to take place. The MOD would allow a slot for this plane to land, to take off, and for people and the animals to be loaded on. There's no doubt at all from people on the ground that the efforts that were made, time doing the paperwork and time for this flight to land and take off and the processing, that was all time that was not used to get other human beings out of Kabul. This getting every single one of those dogs out would have cost the lives of human beings. What do you make of that?
I mean, I'm not cited to all of the detail of exactly what happened on the ground, but from those who I have spoken with, it was certainly a distraction. Whether or not it prevented, how many, who knows how many Afghans from getting out. But it certainly was an unnecessary distraction when people on the ground, the leaders and all the men and women doing everything they could, were trying to focus on saving human life. I'm an animal lover, as many of us are, but I think, there are humans who have been killed as a result of not making it out. And that is very, very, sad to know that was the outcome.
Absolutely. Ash Alexander Cooper, OBE, former British Army Colonel, so with 8 tours in Afghanistan. Thank you very much, Dee, for joining us. Quick word for better